What's happening, Hardscapers? Today we're going to talk about leveling your initial base course for your retaining wall, the most crucial step of building any retaining wall. Let's get into this. Like I said, the most crucial and most difficult step of any retaining wall build is that initial course. You want to get that initial course perfect. After that, it's just a matter of stacking stones on top of one another, ensuring that you're keeping that stagger of course, and then checking every once in a while just to ensure that you're keeping that level, because there could be some discrepancies from wall block to wall block, just depends on how it's produced. But it's that initial course that sets everything up for success afterwards. It takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of skill, but we're gonna run through everything that you need to know with that initial course of your retaining wall. And this of course comes after that preparation leading up to it. Everything from planning your retaining wall build, from the location, deciding how deep you're digging for your retaining wall, as well as that width of the trench, disposing of that excavated material, lining it with a geotextile to separate your subsoil from your base material, installing that base material, compacting it, and getting it to a point where you're ready to install that initial course. If you have any questions about anything that I just mentioned there, there's going to be a link in the description below, as well as a video at the end of this video that is a step-by-step guide to building retaining walls. But in this video, we're focusing on that initial course. Once that base is prepped, we need to decide where our starting and ending point for that retaining wall is and what we're squaring it to. Hopefully we've done this and got it pretty accurate in our excavation and base preparation phase, but now is the time to actually set up a string line, which is going to help you keep your retaining wall initial course nice and straight. It's just not enough to follow the retaining wall blocks as you level them to ensure that you're staying square or parallel to a foundation, whatever it might be, because you will run out of that straight line eventually and you'll end up with a wavy retaining wall. By setting up a string line, it'll take just a little bit more time, but it'll ensure a perfectly straight retaining wall. In setting up that retaining wall, we will decide what our wall is going to be square to or run parallel against. This is typically some sort of foundation or a fence, some sort of structure that we're building the retaining wall almost against. In this example's case, we actually have a fence along the back of this backyard that we're building the retaining wall parallel to. And then we have an arbitrary starting point and an arbitrary ending point. This is just enough to give our client garden space for their retaining wall. So we knew our starting point was square to this fence post, and then we were running 31 feet afterwards to the final fence post. And when our fence is much higher to where our base material is that we can't really run a tape measure against, what we'll do is we'll take our 8-foot level, we'll make it level vertically, and then we'll just measure against that fence post, and that'll ensure that we're super accurate with where our pin for our string line is gonna go. Now we won't set up our initial pin that it'll impede where our first block is going to go, so we will extend that a little bit past the base because we should have at least a 6-inch extension for our base, so it'll start at the very beginning part of the base material, rather than where our initial retaining block is going to go. And then, like I said, we'll just run that string line the same length of the fence, 31 feet in this example, and we'll do the same thing with our level to ensure that we are nice and parallel with that fence, ensuring that the initial measurement for that first pin is the same as the second pin from the fence. Additionally, what you can do with your string line is set a string line level on top of it, level that string line, and make sure that it is the height of your retaining wall block above the base material. And then not only are you using the string line to make sure that your initial course is nice and straight, but also it'll show you where the height of that retaining wall block should be as you begin to level them. Now what I like to do is I like to screed for my initial retaining wall block. I always use HPB, or it's a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch clean crushed angular crushed stone. It's a perfect bedding layer for retaining wall block. It's also really easy to work with in comparison to other bedding materials. So in doing so, if we're going to use the screed method, which you don't have to. You can level on top of your base material for your retaining wall blocks. Just is a little bit more difficult and a lot more time consuming. But like I said, if we're going that screeding method, we do need to add an extra inch to the height of a retaining wall block when setting that string line. And that's of course assuming that you're using 1-inch screed pipes to screed that. Now when setting our screed pipes, you can run it parallel to the structure that you are building your retaining wall to, but it is best to run them perpendicular to that structure. I find that you get a little bit better accuracy in terms of leveling out your screed bars when they're further apart as opposed to when they are closer together, which they would be if you're running them parallel to that structure. You also have less voids to fill in afterwards if you are running them perpendicular. Because once you're done screeding, you then have to pull out the screed bars and then fill in those voids with material. So now with this, we can set our screed bars in there, make sure that they are level from side to side, from screed bar to screed bar, as well as each screed bar is level as well. So we'll check the top of the screed bars as well as the bottom of the screed bars, side to side, in front and back. We'll fill in with our HPB, we'll pull a level across it, and that'll reveal our perfectly level surface to then start to level our block to. Now when we are leveling our retaining wall units, we place it on the screeded layer, and then I use a torpedo level to place on top of the unit to check it left to right in front and back. And I check it front and back on the left side of the unit as well as the right side of the unit. And if it is out of level a little bit, I use a Deadblow Hammer rather than a rubber mallet, because a Deadblow Hammer will allow that impact to follow right through to the retaining wall block units, whereas a rubber mallet will absorb some of that impact. And once again, you can use your string line as a guide for this, but you should definitely be using your string line to ensure it's straight. Now, some retaining wall blocks are double-sided and some retaining wall blocks are single-sided. And what that means is there's a textured side and a flat side. You should have your string line against the flat side, whether that's the front or the back of the retaining wall, because that textured side will have some irregularities in its straightness. However, some retaining wall blocks are double-sided, so there's a texture on both sides, and you can run your string line off of where the split face is or off of where an actual straight rib on the retaining wall block is. Whatever is going to give you the best guide to ensure that retaining wall is straight as you're placing the blocks. Once you have that initial retaining wall block placed and it is level from side to side, front to back, using your torpedo level and hammering down with a Deadblow Hammer on whatever side that you need to lower, you can then proceed to the next retaining wall block. Now from here on out, this is where screeding really benefits you, because that screed layer should get you really close to being level for each retaining wall block unit. It's not necessarily just a matter of placing them, but you will need to check them after they've been placed and make some minor adjustments. So we place the next unit, we double check that it's level from side to side and front to back, but we also now need to make sure that we're level to the previous unit that we've placed. Because you could have placed that unit, it's level front to back, side to side, but it's higher or lower than the previous unit that you've placed. And that's especially if you had to adjust that previous unit a lot. So what we do after placing a unit is we check its height compared to the previous unit, and if it's lower, we will remove that unit and then place a little bit more material underneath it and then place it back to make sure that it's the same height of that unit. If it's higher, we need to take that unit out and remove some material and place it back. Once we're pretty close to that height, and if anything, it should be higher rather than lower so that you can hammer it down into place. But now that we've got that height from unit to unit right, we need to check its levelness. So front to back, side to side, and making sure it's level. And in doing so, we repeat the same process throughout the length of a retaining wall. It's nice to have a long level as well to place on the initial course as you go to ensure that it's level over a longer stretch of that retaining wall. So we have an 8-foot level, we place it on our initial course as we build, just to ensure that we're level throughout all of those courses and there's no discrepancies. Like I said, this is the most important step of the process for any retaining wall build, so we want to make sure that we're accurate in this. So we'll continue through our initial course, we'll get to the end, and now this sets us up for success with the rest of our retaining wall build, because all we're doing from here on out is stacking blocks, like I said, ensuring those staggers, and checking every once in a while just to double check that we're not getting out of levelness front to back, side to side, throughout our courses. Some retaining wall blocks are very good with their variances. Other retaining wall blocks are not so good with their variances. So there could be discrepancies from block to block, just from the concrete itself, not from your installation. And when you're stacking those retaining wall blocks on top of your initial course, you want to sweep it off, make sure there's no residue, make sure there's no other debris on it. Place any locking mechanisms on top or in the retaining wall blocks, and place that retaining wall block on top, building up your retaining wall, as well as the backfill area while you build up your retaining wall and compacting in behind it, making sure that your drainage pipe is in there. Oh, and if you are a DIYer and you want a course on building retaining walls to help you with your project, there's a link in the description below for that. And if you are a business owner and you want more information on this, as well as a course that'll help you onboard employees or train employees, there's a link in the description below for those courses. We also have the How to Hardscape Headquarters software, which will help you budget, estimate, and streamline processes in your business along with those courses. And that is a membership there for those resources. Link is in the description below. But we're getting into a lot of different topics that are going to be covered in our retaining wall step-by-step guide installation, which should pop up here anytime soon, or the link is in the description below. If you have any questions, leave a comment in the comment section below. I'll respond to anybody and everybody that has any questions there. Like this video if you found it helpful for whatever reason, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more hardscaping content like this. Thank you so much for watching.